All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started with chapter 4, which is going to be focusing on letters, memos, and electronic communication. As always, I will be highlighting key points from this chapter, but I always recommend for you all to go back and review the chapter on yourself as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So for this chapter, I feel like when you've probably seen this in the syllabus, you're like, why emails? Why are we discussing emails? I know we've already discussed reports, proposals, but actually, you may write more letters, memos, and emails in your career than any other type of document. So it's usually the most common form of writing. When in this context of this chapter, letters, memos, and emails, any electronic communication, it's all going to be referred to as correspondence. Personally, I think electronic reading skills are so important and needed. I can't tell you how many times I come across an email. I'm like, did no one teach you? I feel like we don't teach that. We don't teach you all what's the proper way to draft an email, making sure your subject line is correct. And your letters or your memos, is the correct name on there? Are you addressing the right person? So letters, memos, and emails, they all have different purposes. As you can see, letters, those are usually conveyed to convey your message to readers outside of your organization. Memos are internal communication for your readers. And then emails, we all know what emails are. They're just a quick way to respond to your readers inside or outside of your organization. As always with these chapters, there are some general guidelines for correspondence. I won't discuss them all, but I do want to highlight some key guidelines. Like I said, I recommend you go back and review them all. And they all probably sound familiar. We've used the similar language, know your reader, duh, of course, because that's going to help you draft your letter, your memo, your email, your correspondence. If you don't know who your reader is, always recommend to go out and find out who you are emailing or who you're sending the memo to. Know your purpose. Write down your purpose in one clear sentence. This actually usually becomes the first sentence in your correspondence. And there are some examples that I wanted to provide. So, for example, your letter. As you requested yesterday, I'm sending some samples. For your memo, you actually state, like, this memo explains the organization's new policy. And then email, that first sentence is like, you usually introduce yourself or you say, hey, so and so, I have attached the most recent draft. It's just usually that first sentence is how you open the tone and the emphasis on what you're going to be discussing. Follow correct format when drafting an email. Make sure your subject line is filled with some type of hint on what you're going to be discussing. Don't give some vague subject line, or please, whatever you do, don't leave it empty. Make sure you put something in your subject line, to whom to address. Usually that's on memos and letters. Make sure you are addressing the accurate person. Make sure you're giving your readers some insight on what to expect. Used first person language. This is so important because you want to make sure that your correspondence is very action driven and action focused and also reader focused. So you don't want to use general like they email language or terms. You want to use very specific terms. So if you know who you are addressing your email to, state their name. If you don't and you are addressing a team, make sure you say your team, you will find this. It just makes it more personable, but also it makes it seem more urgent and serious. Use attachments for details. If you're just sending an email, say like, hey, I'm following up. I know you requested this information. Please see the attached. Something as simple as quick as that. So that way you're not explaining the whole entire thing in one large email. You're giving a brief introduction. Please review the attached and then go from there. And then respond quickly when you're sending out letters or memos or even emails where there might be some next steps. Give your reader plenty of time to review. So if you were sending an email to your team saying, I need an update by end of day Wednesday, probably don't send that email, Wednesday morning or even Tuesday morning. Try to give your readers some time to review and respond appropriately. When it comes to emails, I always tell people try to respond day of. Don't wait a day. Don't wait a couple of days. Sometimes in your fields you don't get that option. I'm in a very media-driven industries, and I've been on the client side. Sometimes I have to respond to my clients within the hour. It just depends on your industry, your environment, and your organization. When it comes to correspondence, remember correspondence is going to be letters, memos, and emails. It's just one general term, correspondence. You're either going to be relaying positive news, negative news, or just neutral news. So for positive, you are relaying good news. Usually this is like a job offer or like, hey, project is ahead of schedule, something positive that's going to excite your client, your team, your organization, your reader. We all know the ABC method when it comes to positive, neutral, and negative correspondence. Always use the ABC method. No matter what type of correspondence you're drafting, always use the ABC method. So with abstract, you are bridging the correspondence that you're drafting between the last communication with that person. So usually this is in a terms of hey, it was great seeing you at the corporate gala last week. I know we briefly discussed this, and then go into what you want to talk about. And that's usually that leads into your body. Sometimes that's clarification of any questions your reader may have, or qualification of good news. Usually this is like next steps. So let's say you have a positive correspondence, you are offering a job to somebody. You say, thank you for taking your time to interview with all of us. We would like to offer you this job. And then you go into the description. Usually you attach the job offer letter. You go over details. If the candidate is interested and wants to accept the position, then you go into next steps on what to do next. And then the conclusion is just usually a statement of eagerness to either continue the relationship, you've completed the project, I look forward to this. It's just always a nice way to end a positive correspondence, where you are telling your reader that you're looking forward to hearing from them in the future. Negative correspondence. Sometimes you're not always going to deliver good news. You might have to deliver bad news. And when it comes to negative correspondence, always try to buffer the bad news, but be clear with your readers. They don't want to, essentially, I hate to say it, no BS when it comes to negative correspondence. Be clear, be upfront. And depending on the situation, be sympathetic, empathetic, try to relate to your reader, and that's usually actually what the textbook recommends when it comes to your abstract portion of the negative correspondence. Try to find a common bond or an area of agreement. While you may be delivering news that your reader doesn't want to hear, try to relate to them. Try to find some commonality. The body is where the area where it's going to be buffered. I understand you may not like this, but X, Y, and Z. Or I understand where you're coming from, but X, Y, and Z. So buffer it, relate to them, but be clear on where you're coming from. And then your conclusion, it's usually a statement, if appropriate, of what will happen next. But sometimes when it comes to negative news, there isn't a statement of what happened will next. Sometimes you're just going to end the conversation. The next slide I have is actually an example of negative correspondence that I actually just sent this out recently. I was communicating with the reporter. He sent me a bunch of questions about a customer who was upset I believe, in the Sacramento area. The reporter sent me a bunch of questions. My team looked into it. I work for a bank. We have a lot of regulations and guidelines, and I legally bound cannot reveal certain things within our company. So there were some questions a reporter asked me that I just literally could not legally answer. So this is how I addressed the reporter. I addressed him, keep it personal, hi Curtis. I said, I understand and I appreciate your willingness to work with me. I would like to be helpful. I'm trying to be understanding. I'm trying to relate to them. I understand where he's coming from, and then I go into explaining why I can't answer his questions. I give some insight into why. I tell him that, our team already did the initial request And while that's all that I can do, I can't elaborate any further. I appreciate your partnership. Have enjoy the rest of your weekend. I couldn't answer him. I couldn't give him what he wanted. So I tried to buffer it as much as I can, but I was still clear and concise. Neutral correspondence. Honestly, I view this as like the day-to-day stuff because your reader doesn't, have like a personal stake in this type of news. Neutral correspondence usually requires less emphasis on tone and tact than perhaps other types. This is just the day-to-day stuff where it's just routine everyday communication. You want a follow-up on this project, or what's the status on this? It's usually like, hey, what's going on? What's the follow-up? What's the status? What's the FYI? So it's just routine, but still be clear about your inquiry or your response. ABC method still applies to this type of correspondence. What's the precise purpose of this? So because there's nothing you are delivering, you're not giving an updates or you're not delivering like a job offer. Maybe you're an HR recruiter and you're reaching out to the team like, hey, what's the status? Did you complete all your interviews? Do you need more candidates? Sometimes you're reaching out to a team and saying like, hey, can you review this by, end of day Tuesday? Or maybe you're extending an invitation like, hi, so and so, thank you for your partnership. We would actually invite you to our company luncheon, something like that. So it's not usually anything major. It's just follow-ups, invitations, everyday routine stuff. The body, that's usually where the details support your correspondence. The description of your request, details for the invitation, and then the conclusion, statement appreciation. So if you're following up with a team on like, hey, can you provide me the status of this project? Always close it with like, appreciate your time or thank you for your support. If you are inviting someone to like a company luncheon, usually you conclude with like description of next steps. Please RSVP by Wednesday. Guidelines for emails. The chapter goes over guidelines for letters and memos. It's pretty standard, but like I said at the beginning of this video, I feel like emails is really where it's at. Emails are so important. I feel like we don't talk about it enough. So some general guidelines, I believe, for emails that I hope you take forward into your career is I cannot stress enough subject line. I've seen way too many, and not even from students. You would be surprised, like professionally, how many emails I've received from people with no subject lines and they go straight into like their question, their request. It's very jarring. So make sure one, you fill out the subject line, but also make sure your content matches the subject line. So don't, when you're putting your subject line, don't just put like a word, but give some insight. If you're asking someone for an update, you can usually put update, colon, um, project name, something like that. Don't send too quickly. Always proofread. And this is why I was saying you would be surprised. I'm not just referring to like students, I'm talking about professionally as well. I had a colleague on my team. We were emailing a reporter. The reporter's name was Melanie. And this person on my team, who was above me, so he was the one kind of taking the lead with the conversation, he called her Wanda in one of the emails, and her name was Melanie. I think he just asked a question, and hit quickly without proofreading. So always proofread. And the reporter followed up with us and actually was, she was honest, and she's like, I think this email wasn't for me because my name is not Wanda. He then had to backpedal, try to explain, I'm sorry. It was embarrassing. So that's why I said, don't send too quickly. Always proofread because you don't want to embarrass yourself. You don't want to hurt your reputation, or you don't want to hurt your organization's reputation. You just want to make sure everything is buttoned up. Format your message carefully. So ABC method, I can't stress that enough. Introduction, go into the body, conclusion, whether that's next steps, given a deadline, try to format carefully. And also, when it comes to this, Try to use, if you have a lot of information, try to use bullet points, try to use numbers, attach something if there's additional details. Chunk information for easy scanning. That's usually the bullet points, numbers, or that's where the ABC method comes into play, abstract. So, hi, so and so, intro to the problem or the topic, body, discuss the topic, and then conclude. So, some examples that I wanted to provide, because I feel like with this type of chapter, you kind of need to see examples. And the textbook gives great examples, especially with all of them letters. They provide an example of like a negative letter, a memo, more emails. But with these type of with emails, I wanted to provide some examples. So as you can see, subject line. Um, I needed I needed to email someone within my company and I needed his approval. I drafted an article. I wanted to quote him, and I wanted him to review it to see if there was anything else he needed to that should be added to the article. So the subject line, as you can see, media approval needed, and I give some hint of what it's about. He's based in Oakland, and also this newspaper is in Oakland, and it's about small businesses. Small biz, that's an internal abbreviation for us. So it's something he's familiar with. I say, "Hi, Oscar, keep it personal." I've never met him before, so I can't just be cold emailing him, asking him, like, "Hey, Oscar, review and approve." I introduce myself. I tell him who I am. I tell him which team I sit on, especially because I work in a huge organization. We have so many teams. I have to be explicit with where I sit and with whom. And then I go into the body, which is the point of why I'm emailing him. I explain it's a media partnership that my company is doing. And because of that, I drafted this article, but now I need his approval on a few things. And then that's when I go into number one and number two. I break it down for him. There's two things that I need from him. So I make it easy for him to read along. So give him the first step, give him the second step. And then I conclude with, can you please send me a revised draft by Wednesday AM? And I sent this email on Friday. So I gave him plenty of time to review, to get back with me with any questions. So pretty much all the steps that the textbook was talking about. And so that's why I wanted to show you an example of what I've done. Another example you will remember on a previous slide where I said respond quickly. Sometimes with responding quickly, it doesn't have to be a well drafted response. Take, for example, this email. My coworker emailed me saying for next steps, and she gave me the next step. She said, "Selena, can you do X, Y, and Z?" I was very busy, but I needed to respond to her to let her know that I seen her email, I reviewed it, I read it. And so a simple aligned thanks, everyone. Sometimes that's all you need to do. Sometimes you just need to let your team members, your manager, whoever it may be, know and acknowledge, I received your email. Or if you received a memo from someone outside of your organization, sometimes you can email that person being like, "Thank you for your memo. Our team is reviewing. We'll get back to you." Something simple and quick. And that's it. Like I said, it was a short chapter. But I just wanted to focus on this because I feel like correspondence, remember, letters, memos, and emails, they're so important. It's most of the things that you're going to be doing in your day to day stuff. So I just wanted to highlight briefly because you're going to be dealing with it every day. So, everyone, that was it for this chapter. There will be homework assignments related to this chapter. You can find that on Canvas. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Until then, I will see you with the next video. Bye, everybody.